what Doc had in 08 was special. And he was lucky as hell. Lucky as hell. The year before that, they was wearing trash bags.
He could have got fired. Nobody would have made a peep. Yeah.
Made a peep. But then the next year they win it. Now he's one of the bestest coach ever. I'm just not feeling that.
Is he overrated as a coach?
I think so.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
I don't think that's as crazy as it sounds. If you go look, and this is what I've always said about the emotional lack of discipline on the LA Clippers, it starts with Doc Rivers. That team has had the most technical fouls in the league since Doc Rivers took over the Clippers. That's a reflection of Doc Rivers. We saw him earlier in the year going after an official and having to be restrained. Again, I like Doc Rivers. Everybody likes Doc Rivers. He plays the media like a baby grand piano. Everybody sings his song. But at some point, you got to do more than Vinny Del Negro in Los Angeles. It is what it is.
No, look, I agree with Big Baby. Now, I think Doc is a good coach. I'm not saying he's not a good coach. He's a bad coach. But he is viewed as, a top 3, top 5 coach in
like
the
he's
NBA.
Pop or somebody.
He's not at that elite level because outside of those 3 or 4 years in Boston with the Big Three, you haven't seen any evidence of that. He was 4 years in Orlando where they were mediocre. The start of the 5th year, they were 1-10. He gets fired. He goes to Boston. 3 seasons, they get worse every year, and that's when Danny Ainge could have fired him and nobody would have said anything. Then they bring in the Big Three. And Doc, that was perfect for Doc. Just like Draymond Green is in a perfect situation in Golden State as a player. Rondo was in a perfect situation with the Big Three, hasn't done much since then. But Doc, with his motivational, the Ubuntu.
Tom Thibodeau.
True, but Thibodeau's not looking great either right now.
He's a hell of a defensive coordinator.
Their defense isn't any good right now in Minnesota. I'm just saying. But Doc, it was a perfect match. And what Big Baby also said on that podcast was you had KG, Ray Allen, and Paul Pierce, who made sure everybody did what Doc wanted done. Right. So he was like, they deserve the credit. So to your point, I thought Doc was going to take the Clippers to the promised land. Because we can rave about the Warriors' talent and Cleveland's talent. On paper, Jimmy, the Clippers got a lot of talent.
But they got talent. My whole thing with Doc has not been a coach. And now keep in mind, the player, it just depends on the player and the relationship with that coach, whether he's a good coach or not. I didn't play for some coaches that I didn't like because of how we interacted, but they were good coaches. Yeah. With Doc, my whole thing has been their player personnel moves. Yeah, some of the moves they've made haven't allowed them to really take advantage of winning a championship. That's been my overall criticism of Doc, playing that president's role. The coaching, I understand that you got to put people in the right position. Don't get me wrong on that perspective, but the way they built out their team over the last 4 or 5 years, to me, it's left me scratching my head with some of the moves. And now you wonder why you don't win or have an opportunity to win. You know, for me.
You got a top 3 point guard.
That's it.
I know he's hurt. What is Blake? A top 5 power forward? DeAndre Jordan's a top 5 center. I know you got to put it together.
Backup point,
but that's
you
what
don't have a 3. I know, but I'm saying, but you don't have
the whole thing. But the whole thing is what, because you guys are talking about, well, great is that word we throw around all of our time to talk about players and coaches and everything. What great coach doesn't have what you talked about? Yeah, doesn't have what you talked about in Boston. You have a plan that you want executed. You have to have your players execute that and permeate that throughout the locker room. How do the players interpret what it is you're saying? The question I would have for Big Baby is, were you receptive to what he wanted you to do, the way he wanted it done? Were you questioning it? All of those things come into play because we're not going to talk about any great coach in any genre of sports that doesn't have players running the asylum.
On the players than the coach? Is that what you guys are saying?
No.
I know
a coach has to impose his will.
No, that's so
the elite. Hold on. The elite coaches do that. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying Doc's not good, but Greg Popovich is good no matter who is playing for him.
Greg Popovich
is Tim Duncan there now?
No, but
they on pace to win about 62 games,
and he still has a pretty good squad. If you look at what's going on,
they had one All-Star.
With New England, do they have great players or is it coaching?
There you go.
With New England.
New England Patriots?
Yeah. I'm talking about great. I'm talking about compared to who they play.
Do you understand who quarterbacks for them?
No, that's players. I'm talking about outside of that.
Outside of that, yes, they have, across the board, they've always had good players.
They ain't got a bunch of Hall of Famers like San Francisco had a great coach in Posey's will. I want to get us back to Doc Rivers. I think there's a lack of discipline from Doc that the biggest sign of it is, and I know this will make me unpopular, having his damn son on the roster.
I knew you were
is
going
the,
well.
I don't care.
Our backup, Austin,
I don't
has
care.
become
It makes
pretty
it
decent
harder
player.
to coach when your son's on the team. Anytime, you ever been on a team where the coach's son's on the team?
My dad
causes all
coached me. He was
kind of
always
drama.
harder on me.
Don't talk. I'm not talking about what grade is this? Fourth, fifth.
Seventh grade.
You get to high school, college, and the son's on the team. It makes it hard to coach.
I'll say this: when Doc's first year with the Clippers, they beat Golden State in the first round of the playoffs. Obviously, Golden State took off and left them in the dust. The only difference. Now they got Kevin Durant, but before they got Kevin Durant, they left the Clippers in the dust. Only difference was a new coach in Golden State, Steve Kerr. That's it. The players remain the same. And Doc was the coach when they dropped a 3-1 lead to Houston. Not Oklahoma City, not Cleveland, Houston.
But you also can't fault Doc for not having a closer on his team. Like with Blake Griffin, you talk about him at the end of the games where how these guys don't show up.
Players, but
Chris Paul.
Chris Paul's a closer. We gotta go.
I know
I'm
Chris
sorry.
Paul is.
We gotta go.